And here we are with Michael Fine in Soissons. I'm very excited to do this Ask Maestro with you, Michael. First, because it's the first time I am physically with one person for one of these shows. And we are kind of working together on a project and social distancing as much as we can here. Secondly, because you are quite a remarkable specimen in our industry, in our art. Michael Fine is a recording producer of historical proportion. Michael was the president of artists and the main producer at Deutsche Grammophon for many years, with some stunning projects with the greatest artists of the last 50 years. And Michael is also an artistic director, a consultant, eminence grise of so many orchestras. But, and this is a new activity, at least it's new to me, you are also a composer.
Yes.
And a clarinetist.
Yes.
But probably in our industry, the most noble job is the one of the composer. And without Beethoven, we are nothing. And so I find it very interesting that you are really at the very top of the profession in any of those faculties. But let's start with the recording producer. And let's start with the difficult questions. Why do a recording today? The major labels are collapsing. Nobody is buying a CD. We get anything we want on YouTube and on the internet without having to pay. What's the point?
Recording is important for the artists. Artists need to listen to themselves, hear their own work. Recordings help you grow as an artist. You can play a concert, you can think you're prepared, but when you come into the recording studio, you will discover things about your playing, about the music, about every aspect of how you approach your art than you ever will preparing for concerts. I remember years ago, someone asked Charles Dutoit what made the Montreal Orchestra into a fine orchestra. He said, studio recording every few weeks, because it requires a level of focus and concentration. It's like preparing for a tour. The preparation for a tour is much more substantive than the preparation for the average concert. And the preparation for a recording comes on many levels. First, you have the artist. Studying, preparing. I always tell artists, preparation for a recording is completely different than for a concert. Then you have our preparation, that we're also studying the score, thinking about the questions, listening to the artist's performances, thinking about how do I get into that artist's head to give them back what they want. And you have the recording team, the engineers, the kind of microphones to get the sound, the ideal sound for that artist. And all those elements come together as they did today here in Soissons, with a wonderful pianist, a great piano, phenomenal piano technician, an essential part of our team. I'm producing, so I'm listening. I'm the audience for the concert. A whole team of people just to make something incredibly special. But you might ask, people sometimes ask me, why do we need another recording of Beethoven?
Right.
Okay. The reason is, you've heard me say this before, Emmanuel, every artist has to climb these mountains. The mountains are there. When they asked President Kennedy why America had to go to the moon, he said, I think he said, because it's there. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. As long as you're an artist and you have that piece of music on your stand, you need to perform it. You need to find an approach to it. You need to solve its problems, because if you want to be a great artist playing the most recent compositions, you have to have gone through the process, because all of music is a continuum. If you want to play the Boulez Piano Sonata, you better be able to play the Bach suites. You better be able to play the Beethoven sonatas, the Mozart sonatas. If it's humanly possible, even the Brahms, they're so difficult. And it all comes together. It all comes together in a recording session.
But then, okay, I get this. It pushes your limits. You listen to things differently also as an artist when you record, and you absolutely explore territories that you didn't even know were possible to explore. But still, at one point, who is going to listen to this? How does it connect with your career and the industry of recording in general, and the industry of who presents the artist in the concert hall?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting for me that it has to be about, maybe it's 50 years ago, that a very influential magazine in the United States called Saturday Review had a cover. It said, "The Death of Classical Music."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 2 years before they had the death of God. That's a different, more philosophical discussion. And the funny thing is, now 50 years later, we're not dead. And in many parts of the world, we're growing. And in some parts of the world, we have an extremely young audience, as in South Korea, for example, or China. Wherever I go in the world to make music, people want to hear these recordings. I must get every day 100 emails from young musicians saying, can they find a recording of this artist playing this? And they want to compare 15 different recordings of that. This week in South Korea, a friend of mine is doing a recording of for children, the 4 Impromptu for Harp. She's going to play it and talk about it, and there are going to be probably at least 50 to 60,000 hits on YouTube for this, minimum. When Sung Jin Cho won the Chopin competition, I think there were over 1 million listeners in Korea. So the thing about music is that, for reasons that neither of us can explain or understand, every year there are millions of children born who, for reasons we don't know, will somehow discover when they're quite young, wow, Beethoven is a great composer. I love this music. And at the same time, you have people approaching their 50s who have some extra money and discover the concert hall. Maybe they heard a concert when they were a kid, a youth concert, and now they have time. So many of my friends began to discover music in their 50s and discover how important it was, and then say, oh, I really loved the Appassionata Sonata. I want to go back and listen to every recording. So I believe firmly and passionately that we are living art. We have living people making art. We have young people studying this art. And this is something that is not ever going to go away as long as people have hearts and minds and a desire to grow as human beings.
Absolutely. So music is not going to die as long as there is a soul, as long as there is this necessity to sing and to express something and to connect to the geniuses of the past or of the present. But the support for this is changing. The business model for this is changing. So how do you understand that change? So clearly you just started talking about it. We are listening a lot online. Physical CDs are still important in Asia, but less and less in the rest of the world. YouTube is very important. How can a producer survive with this? How can a record company survive with this?
When I was growing up, my grandfather had a collection of recordings. There were 6 or 7 artists. There was Toscanini, Bruno Walter, Vladimir Horowitz, etc. These were the people who were recording. Nowadays, anyone can record and then let the public decide, is it a worthy recording? I've never been busier in my life than in the past 10 or 15 years, and many artists who would otherwise go unnoticed now have an opportunity to express themselves. And again, let the public decide. I have more work than I can actually handle in the course of a given year as a recording producer. Some interesting things have changed. Because of technology, we can do a lot more in recordings. And recordings are in some ways an idealized version of what the artist can play. my job, if an artist comes to me and says, wow, you really understand me, that's how I sound, then I've done my job. So it's a great joy in a way, because my aesthetic is not necessarily important. My job is to capture the artist's aesthetic. When they agree, then I'm much happier, and I think the artist is as well. But this role, this strange role that I have, it's hard to explain what we do. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've done recording sessions together. You know that there's a voice coming out of a box saying, bad, 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 measure 43, bad. And I used to joke that this is not a way to make friends. Mm-hmm. Because basically we're telling people what isn't good. That's our secretarial function. Right. This no wrong, that no wrong.
Right. So this is a very difficult relationship. And when you are, for instance, let's talk about orchestral recording, the connection between the recording producer in the booth outside of the concert hall and the conductor himself on the podium is a very important one. And a conductor, as you know, needs to appear secure, but is the most insecure of all. And his super ego is constantly telling him, you're not worth it. Beethoven knows better than you, and you will never reach that. So all of a sudden, you have a voice, the voice of God, who is actually confirming all of this. So this is indeed very hard. But of course, we are all playing a role. We know what it is, and you are incredibly famous for respecting the artist without compromising with the composer. And I think this is the key of what's happening here, bringing the best of the composition and of what that group can that day. What made you a recording producer? How did that happen? Did you wake up one day and say, Mommy, I will be a recording producer?
No.
No.
I want to go back a little bit to what you said. And that is, in every recording situation, you start at a certain level. So my job is, how much can I push it?
Right.
And there always comes a point, there are points of resistance. But, again, the thing I always say to myself is, if I can make it better, I have to try. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a conductor will say, I'm really sorry, but that's the best we can do. And I try to find a way to say, let's try a different way. Let's try something else. And the relationship with the conductor, the first time I worked for recording with an Asian orchestra, and I had to very gently tell the conductor that I thought he was rushing. The orchestra was in shock.
Getting faster, too fast. Yeah.
Yes, nobody tells maestro. Of course, it's my job to tell maestro. And there are two ways. One is a telephone. So I can ring a phone rings, the conductor, yes, and then he transmits what I'm saying back. That some conductors feel more secure without hearing someone tell them, but we lose time. And because time is money, and orchestras are available for a 3-hour call with a 20-minute break on the hour, we need to move fast. So most of the artists I work with don't object to a speaker with this annoying voice.
Well, but actually, when you speak to the conductor, it's also a way to getting a message through to the second clarinet.
Absolutely.
And the conductor can be very happy that you are carrying that news.
And some conductors will say, I need you to say something to that particular musician because I can't. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. So there, as you say, we're playing roles. And sometimes a conductor will say, as I said, that's the best we can do. And I'll insist, and the conductor will say to the orchestra, it's him. I think it sounded perfect, but Michael wants us to do it again.
So before we go to your question to your mother, what are the situations that were the most difficult between you and an orchestra and a conductor? Where is it you say, whoops, I don't know how I'm going to go out of this ditch? No names, but names if you want.
No names. I remember I was doing a recording with a very famous orchestra. A wonderful piece actually you and I recorded as well. And the conductor was having a difficult time making a transition. So going from one section in one mood to another section in another mood in a different tempo. it just wasn't working. So finally, very reluctantly, I said, why don't you just play it through in first tempo, first mood? Just play across the transition, and then play it in the slower tempo and in the other mood. And of course, what I thought to myself is I could just snip and make a nice cut. The musicians started to shuffle their feet and clap their hands because they wanted to get done. It was getting to lunch. We did it. It was 5 minutes before the end of the session, and I said, "Thank you very much. Let's have lunch early." Well, the conductor was very angry. He came back and said, "We could have used those 5 minutes." And I thought, we ended on a good note. We accomplished a difficult section. Let's take the extra 5 minutes and give it to the musician. So that was a difficult moment.
Well, in the end, did you get the passage the way it should be?
It was fine. One thing I can say, ideally, the best thing in recording is when the musicians do it well.
Right.
When you achieve that through the process of the recording session with words, with gestures, with people coming together to understand what it's all about, that's the best way. Of course, there are technologies. I could do all kinds of things in my studio, sharp, flat, faster, slower. But ideally, when the musicians understand this is how it should be, and it happens, that's what I want. I mean, sometimes, for example, I had sessions where I'm listening with a conductors I love, and they said, I remember the last take was much more exciting. Make it a little louder. That's the take. Also, our memories are not faulty, but we have filters to how we hear ourselves. And sometimes I've marked in the score, this is the best, and then I get home and listen carefully, and it's maybe not as good as I hoped it would be. But ideally, when we all find ourselves on the same page in the moment, that's the way to do it, rather than with all the technology at my disposal. And I'm good at that stuff too, but I'm happy when we can all smile and say, that's it.
Something is happening now. I would say also, you say, it's when people are on the same wavelength and it's going very well, but that's also where you get more ideas. So it's like with students. If you have a bad student, after a while, you have nothing more to say. Or because you would have to start everything from scratch. With a great student or a great student orchestra, you get more and more ideas. And that's what I feel in your recording. When you get onto something, then there is no time limit, because there is not a concert tomorrow and there is not a rehearsal. And you say, fine, I'm going to work this. I still have 3 minutes to record, and 2 hours. I can go to the end of every second of this, and I can get better and I can get deeper. It's when you are with a bar, you are not able to perform, that all of a sudden those 3 hours are daunting, because you won't get it.
Sometimes
in 3 hours.
The clock slows down. Today, as we were recording, I was watching the clock, and I thought, wow,
already?
How much time we have left? No.
Yeah.
That it's really, we have time to explore, to improve. And then there are the times where, oh my God, we still have 3 pages of score, and these guys aren't getting it. What am I going to do?
So have you recorded, we're talking about the difference between, a live performance and a recording. Have you done a lot of projects where you record live performances and then you do patches afterward? I mean, how do you feel about this? What's the ratio of quality and success? And artistically, what's the difference in taste?
One of my distinguished colleagues has always said musicians think they play better in concerts. We know they play better in sessions. But the question is, what is better? The other important point is that it may say live on the CD or the YouTube, but that live might mean 48 channels with 3 or 4 of us mixing, fixing. We might have recorded the rehearsal and dropped things in. We have the patch session.
You correct the pitch of the singer?
Well,
maybe.
So live is not live. There's always production involved. There are always microphones, and microphones have ears and they hear things in a certain way. So I know there are people that say they love live recordings, but there are many live recordings where the only thing live is the applause. And even sometimes the applause comes from someplace else. I have an applause track that I love, but it has someone with an obvious Asian accent saying "bravo" at the end, and I've been caught because I dropped that in. And I mean, why shouldn't there be a person from Asia at a concert in France?
In Vienna, yeah.
Or in Vienna. But live is.
Okay, so is it easier to work with pianists, singers, violinists? What is it you're looking for with an artist?
The hardest thing probably is concertos, because most recordings are done these days at site, so that there are no rehearsals, there are no concerts. The artists assemble in the morning. We have 5 minutes to get a decent sound, and then let's go. The soloist is ready on the first take to give the performance of a lifetime, but the orchestra is still sorting out things, getting to know the conductor sometimes, getting to know the soloist. The material. And then by the 7th or 8th time we're reading that passage, the pianist or the violinist has already lost it. Things like piano trios are extremely difficult to record because of balance issues. String instruments make a lot of noises. Bows, squeaks, crunches, those are all now edited out, but it's tremendously labor intensive. Solo piano, totally naked. I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing that's easy. There's a lot of beauty and a lot of joy and happiness, but the process is hard work. I served in the Army, and sometimes after a recording session, I feel like I've just been through a battle, not in a bad way, but just the amount of, in the Army, your concentration is what will keep you alive. I can say that from personal experience. And in a recording session, there's not a moment that you cannot be focused on every note that artist is playing. And if you're recording for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day sometimes, that's exhausting. But what I like is when I finish it and I sit back, maybe with a glass of whiskey, and I listen, and I think, that's really beautiful.
Right. So you are an extraordinary producer. You are one of the best producers, if not the best producer for classical music. How did you become a producer, and how does one become a producer?
I don't know about how one becomes a producer. I can tell you how I became a producer. And I was raised largely by my Russian grandfather from Nizhny Novgorod, who was a watchmaker and a music lover. And we listened to music when he was probably my age, I was very little, and he had a tape recorder, and I would actually sing the themes to major symphonic works. I taught myself the clarinet when I was about 7, 8 years old. I never studied music, by the way, which I guess I shouldn't say. But somehow I fell into this. I was working for the late lamented Columbia Artists Management in the opera department, and we had a message from a small British record label saying they wanted to audition some singers for the new medium of CD. My boss said, just do it. He didn't want to be involved in it. And we went through this process of a week. We listened to this is the beginning of we auditioned John Upshaw, Tom Hampson, some people who made good careers. Jerry Hadley, I remember the late Jerry Hadley also came and sang for us. And somehow at the end of the week, the people said, we'd like you to run our company.
Wow.
And how much? And they actually said, how much do you cost? And that's how it started. Now, somehow, at some point, I found myself in one of the recording sessions, and I was asked to take over. And I'd never done this in my life. And I just found it was something that was not difficult, because the way my grandfather and I talked about music, that's what we would talk about.
You were always commenting, and yeah.
But very detailed. And then Grandpa would. We didn't have that many stores. They used to be very expensive. It was before you could download them from the computer. And the scores he had, we would go through them quite carefully. And he was also an amateur. And somehow, after I did that session, I started doing recording sessions, and then people started calling and hiring me. Out of the blue, I ended up producing what ended up being Leonard Bernstein's last composition, Arias and Barcarolles. I won a Grammy Award. I worked a little bit with the maestro on it, and that also led to other things. And as they say in life, one thing led to another.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when I was called by Deutsche Grammophon, I actually thought it was a practical joke of my wife, because I told her I was getting really bored with my current job. And she said, if you could do anything, what would you like? And I said, I'd love to be the head of music at Deutsche Grammophon, but they will never hire me. They have no idea who I am. And the next day, the call came. And I think when I went for the interview in New York, I was very relaxed because I thought it was a joke, because my wife can come up with the most amazing and elaborate schemes for trips and fun things. So, and then the guy said, we want you to go to Hamburg to meet the head of the company. I said, fine. He said, can you go to
You really literally thought it was a joke.
I thought it was a joke. I really did. I came home and I said to my wife, Tammy, I said, you're so good. How did you pull this off? And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, yeah, great. So I'm really going to Hamburg tomorrow, or it was day after tomorrow. She said, I don't know. Are you? And a ticket arrived, by courier, because that was before e-tickets. And I went to Hamburg, and at that point I started to think, maybe this is happening. And I met the head of company, and he said, we'd like you to be the head of music. I said, okay. And the next thing I know, I was on my way to Hamburg, and starting that aspect of the life.
So this is a totally different job than being a musician, than being a producer in the booth doing specific CDs, because you are a businessman and you have to be a visionary, and everybody wants to be your friend, and you are going to have a lot of enemies. How did you navigate all of this?
Not particularly well,
Uh-huh.
to be honest. But the funny thing about that job, which is very much like being the artistic director of a symphony orchestra or an opera company, is that the musicians say you're one of us, and the management says, no, you're one of us. And actually, you're in the middle. So at Deutsche Grammophon, I'm trying to explain why Anna-Sophie Mutter wants a particular something, whether it's compensation, repertoire, to the management. And the management wants me to explain their position back to Anna-Sophie Mutter or Von Otter or anyone.
Which is, we need to sell those CDs, so you need to record this and not that.
Or I'm in a management team meeting at an orchestra where I'm the artistic manager, and the boss says, what's wrong with those musicians? Why are they? And then you tell those musicians, we're not doing this, blah, blah. And then the musicians say, oh, Michael, you're one of us. You're a musician. You explain to the boss why we insist on, having a day off after flying to China or something, quite reasonable, actually. So you always find yourself in the middle, which is why I think these positions can sometimes be very short term to do it successfully. And I think the most important thing in all the jobs I've had is never to be afraid of the public. There's a
trust the public.
Trust the public. The public recognizes.
Absolutely.
And children and young people recognize that. I was at a concert by the Berlin Philharmonic Wind Ensemble in a farming community in rural Pennsylvania. It was a program of Ligeti, Bartok, and Kurtak for kids that had probably never been to a concert before, and they went absolutely crazy for it. So I've gotten myself in trouble by telling my various bosses over the years, don't be afraid of the public. We can do this. This is a great idea. Let's go for it. And if we do our job well, the public will respond in the appropriate way. And I have to say that I've never, ever personally been let down by
Absolutely, absolutely. You might have surprises.
Indeed.
You cannot, good surprises, not so good surprises. You can't always prepare and calculate success, but anything, if you prepare something mediocre, thinking, for instance, on our point of view, well, I'm doing just another poem, I need to find someone, this always sells. It usually doesn't work. Even if it's the 10th poem in 15 years, you need to do it with the absolute conviction.
The other thing is every aspect is important. So if you're doing Mano Nesco and you have this guy that comes out, Nessun si muova, this is Sargente.
Right. Nessun si muova.
So this guy comes out, that's all he does.
Right.
That can destroy the opera.
Yeah.
He comes out and does it in, every little, and this is why opera in particular is so complex. Every little detail is so important. There are roles where even I could sing the jailer, I think, in Tosca.
If you want to audition, we'll talk about it.
But I'm just saying that again, the devil is in the details. And in recordings, I remember years ago, I was teaching a young potential producer, and I let her try to edit a recording I made. And there was a passage, and I said, I corrected that passage, but it's not important. The second violins, you can barely hear it.
All right.
And I said, when you hear this recording in 15 years, you will want to kill yourself. Something like that. But that is why we do what we do. If we can't make it as good as we can, I would rather not bother.
Right. So this is a good segue in your other profession, which is artistic advisor, artistic director. You have been the artistic programmer in Seoul, in Radio France, and in Rotterdam. Right. So in Europe, in Asia, you are also advising, consult in US. So how did you become that person that a lot of orchestra want to have as their programmer and artistic consultant or director?
If you believe in the randomness of the universe.
I do.
Okay. The Rotterdam Philharmonic was looking for an artistic manager. The concert master was a dear friend. And he said, can you recommend someone? And I recommended actually a former colleague from Deutsche Grammophon. And for whatever reason, I think they made a huge mistake. They didn't hire him. They said they wanted to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And I was working in nearby Hanover in Germany.
So just a second, wasn't it another joke from your wife? You didn't think it was a trick? Then, you knew it.
I met with them because I didn't really want the job. This is similar. I was quite relaxed. Mm. And, I asked them a lot of questions, and I went home, and the manager called and said, we'd like to offer you the job. And I said, I'm not really interested. He said, can you come and help us a little? I went, and their artistic manager had left a year before. I said, who is programming yours? It was the 2006-07 season. They said, there's no one. I said, you know what? Let me do it. Because I thought, it has to be done. I'm here. I'll stay for a week. I'll put together a nice season for you. But
to put together a season, you need to know the artist, which probably at that point you knew. You need to know the agents. Mm-hmm. And you need to know what that particular orchestra needs. And the audience.
Yeah. So let's say that I learned reasonably fast. I also trusted the other staff members, the marketing director. Marketing is always like this with artistic. We tell marketing, sell the music that we program. And marketing says, give us music we can sell.
Sure.
So in a good situation,
it's getting worse with the time, actually. That conflict is getting worse.
We had a good relationship. And when the year that I had the best cooperation with the marketing director, we had our best season of sales. Uh-huh. The idea of challenging the audience, of not being afraid of the public is very important, and trusting the audience to take that one step further. And the other thing that's important for me is when I look at a season, it's not individual concerts. There's a line also for the orchestra. So when I, for example, we had Simon Rattle play Bruckner 8 the week before, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, the music director, played Schubert 9. So you have the Austrian, you have so many ways of connecting. Now, I'm assuming the public doesn't come to every concert, but I want the concerts to work vertically as individual concerts, horizontally. And we even did a marketing campaign. We wanted people to buy 5 years worth of subscription. We wanted to say, if you come for 5 years, you will hear all the standard repertoire. You will hear new pieces. I mean, we said it's basically, it's a commitment in your life for art, and you will feel so much better after these 5 years have passed. And we actually sold quite a few of these long-term packages. So yeah, that's an exciting process. And also, it's very important. Conductor A has to follow conductor B. So for example, Valery Gergiev is a very popular conductor at Rotterdam, a former chief conductor. It was very important that a conductor that came the week after be on a similar level, so the orchestra doesn't feel an incredible letdown. I mean, we of course engaged a lot of wonderful young talent, but that wasn't the week to bring them. All those things to put together this gigantic puzzle of building a season that will satisfy the musicians. Very important that they feel challenged, satisfied, fulfilled, that will bring in the public, and that will generate growth, audience growth, not just numbers, but intellectually, musicians' growth. Also, for example, if you're working with an orchestra that has, let's say, a first trumpet player close to retirement, past the best days, you have to be careful about what you program. As a clarinet player, I always like to avoid the Beethoven Eighth Symphony because the high note and the solo. All those factors. Who's going to be the concertmaster that week? Oh, we have a new second bassoon. That's a really important instrument in certain pieces. Has she ever played Sacre, for example? Do I need to, what extras do I need to bring? People that are getting tired. So for example, if I do Mahler 4 and Brahms First Piano Concerto, trombones get the night off, basically. Mahler 4th and Brahms First Piano Concerto. So I mean, there are things you can do so all those aspects are part of managing, artistic management of the symphony orchestra. And I have to say this, and I'm not saying that I have it, but you have to have encyclopedic knowledge
of the repertoire.
The art, the whole thing. And how you get that, I have no idea, but that is required.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, the Daniels is our Bible, and now you can pick up a lot of things online. I totally agree with you with the arch and the line of a season and over even several seasons. And for instance, in all the orchestras I have been artistic director or music director, I had every year not only a plan in terms of balance of what the orchestra should work. For instance, if it's an orchestra that has considerable basic issues, you need to have Mozart Haydn regularly.
Mentally healthy music.
It's the gymnastic that you need to do. And you need to, but I also like to have some kind of fil rouge or dramaturgy that is not necessarily a musicologic one. That means not only the Viennese school, let's say, but that can be a little outside, like music and politics, music and nature. And then that creates another path for the audience and even the players to go through the season and develop themselves. You are insisting a lot on the sensitivity to the audience and to cultures. So being an artistic director or programmer, whatever the title is, in Asia, in Europe, or in the US, is it the same job?
No.
In which way is it different?
Well, first of all, there are certain artists that resonate with certain publics. So if I look at the program brochure for 10 American orchestras, I'll generally see many of the same names. People that are considered essential on a US orchestra season could never work in Europe. Asia has more respect sometimes for aging artists who might be past their prime, but still have something important to say and respect.
And rightfully so, I think.
Absolutely.
I don't care if such incredible violinist doesn't have the fingers anymore, if the soul is there. I can fill the gaps.
I remember Yuka Sarasta telling me about a concert with Isaac Stern. The Brahms concerto, he said, there was one measure that changed my life.
Right. And you need only one.
And that was enough. And I understand that. We're all looking for that one measure to change our lives. We're looking for something memorable. And for me with singers, I want to be able, for example, if I think about anyone from Freni, Tebaldi, Pavarotti, I can imagine them singing anything, even humming a tune, because I know exactly how they phrase, where they put weight on the voice, because their voices are so memorable. And I'm looking for the same thing in pianists, conductors, violins. I want so when you leave the hall, the lingering memory of a musical performance is almost more important.
Of course. And it's actually interesting how the memory is going to be better in the assessment of the quality of a performance than the moment just after the performance or in the performance. I can see I have to struggle to listen to this, especially when it's about judging a piece or contemporary piece or a piece you have never heard. And then it haunts you for days and you say, I get it. And the memory is reconstructing the very structure of the piece and the way it works. So you were talking about Asia. In Europe, how is it different then?
The main difference in Europe, and I hope I don't offend anyone, is that I would say in America, the arts are always slightly on the periphery, slightly on the fringe, where in Europe, in France certainly, in Germany, in the Netherlands where I lived, it's at the center of the cultural life of a city. There was polling done in Germany years ago. How do you feel about taxpayer money going to theater, symphony orchestra, ballet, opera house? The public, even people that didn't go, said, it's important. We want it. Maybe our children will go. At Radio France, there's a sense of, it's a cultural mission and almost bad word, but an evangelical. This is important. It's not a frill. It's not something that we do if we have some extra time. In the States,
it's not only entertainment, it's much more than this.
And the difference, this is something that I'm going to quote my one who always said, the difference between entertainment and art is that art is active. It requires engagement. Entertainment is passive. You sit back on your couch with some snacks, and there's a danger in the United States, in some places, that there's an equality between art and entertainment that I believe shouldn't be there. And in Germany, in France, in Japan, South Korea, art has a unique place, a high place, a place where you walk up to the temple, for want of a better word. Watching television and hearing Tristan and Isolde are two very different things. There are people, partly because of the fear of elitism perhaps in America, that would say they should be the same. That if you're able to enjoy Seinfeld, you should also be able to enjoy Tristan and Isolde.
But I think there is no dichotomy there, because it can be incredibly exciting and entertaining to listen to Wozzeck and to listen to Lulu or Tristan and Isolde. Of course, you need a participation, but I like the American public in its passion and the lack of preconceptions. Very often, an audience in Europe knows what he is going to think about a concert before the concert. That's not the
notions.
Preconceived notions. And the ears are blocked somehow. Yeah. You don't have that in the States.
And you have a passion. You're a Frenchman working in the States, and I'm an American working in the Netherlands and Europe and Asia. So
yes,
we're like this, but I agree. And I'm recently doing work for a really fine American orchestra, and going to some concerts there. First of all, the orchestra is spectacularly good. There is a freshness in the audience that
Well, you can say, which orchestra was it? Minnesota. Yeah.
And I was so, just being in the audience and listening to them speak before the concert and after, occasionally during, There was a wonderful freshness, also a sense of ownership of
Right.
their orchestra.
Yeah.
In Germany, there's a sense of ownership of music.
Yes.
It's a little different.
Right.
I mean, it's, you know, this is Wunzel Beethoven, Wunzel
Yes.
Brahms. In America, it's our Minnesota Orchestra, our LA Phil, our
Right.
Dallas Opera,
Right.
our Met, and so it's different and it's interesting.
Right, and also in the States, you know, I think we cannot talk. It's not the same public in Philadelphia, in New York, in Minnesota, or in Dallas. I mean, this is very, very different culturally too, and in terms of approach to music. It's fascinating to see the connection between the producer, the artistic director, the programmer, but ultimately it's all about composition. It's all about music. So how did you become a composer? You say you're not trained in music. No. I believe you, but you read music very well. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do this. And you have some of the best ears in the business, meaning you hear when there is something wrong. And I can attest to this as a conductor. That's my job, to have 36 lines in front of me and instantly spot where something is not the way it is written on the paper. And you have that ability like many conductors do not. So you have those ears, and you also have a point of view on the music. But these qualities don't make you necessarily a composer. So how did you become a composer, and what kind of music do you write?
I think composing was a natural evolution of everything I've done my entire life. I don't know why I waited till I was in my 60s to do it, but there was a catalyst. My wife received a cancer diagnosis. She's doing very well. She's with us here in Soissons. And I think I was probably going through a rather bad patch, dealing with it. And she said, you know, you have all these musical ideas running through your head. Write some of them down. And as luck would have it, I was on a train in the Netherlands that broke down on a bridge. Of course, I had my cell phone's battery was about dead. I just took a piece of paper and I started writing music stabs on it. And I wrote a piece for flute and string quintet just as a sort of exercise. I sent it to two friends of mine and said, we like this, we're going to perform it and record it. Okay. I didn't wait for a broken down train to keep going. I started the string quartet, and then things began to develop. For me, the most interesting thing that happened as a young composer was I wrote a suite for strings, and it was premiered in the United States. And as I sat listening in rehearsal, I couldn't believe that I had written it. Not that it was great, but I said to the conductor, I said, you found more music in my music than I had any idea was there. And he very modestly said, that's my job. And I developed a rubric then that great musicians make mediocre composers look good. Great composers don't.
No, it's you need to go to the, although, I mean, we were discussing this yesterday. I mean, Mozart is going to take you by the hand, and maybe if you're not complete as a musician, he's such a genius and he's going to help you do this. Beethoven, who is as much a genius, but a very different genius, if you don't understand every single aspect of his composition, he's going to go back and bite you. Bach is so divine, but I mean, you still have to work to go in his path.
Verdi, not Puccini. Puccini can make you look good. Verdi can make you look very bad.
Puccini can make a mediocre orchestra really sound, but Verdi, it's just the bones, and if the bones don't hold, you're dead.
And Verdi's more honest, perhaps?
Right. More direct, more shrewd and raw emotions, less packaged. As a composer, so you're starting to talk about this, but your nature of producer is always find what's wrong, try to fix it, try to make it better. Can you be hands-off as a composer when you're in a rehearsal? How do you deal with this?
I produced 2 recordings of my own music, and they were probably the 2 most difficult sessions that I ever did. And do you know Nicolas Bacri, the French composer?
Yes, yes.
And we were having lunch, and I said, Nicolas, I make mistakes in my compositions that in a recording session, I would catch within a millisecond. And he said, because it's a different side of your brain. And I thought that I would be a very easy composer. When my first string quartet was being premiered in Seoul, I was at the rehearsal, and the first violin looked at me, dear friend, and said, do you really want that D flat? And I thought I would say, yeah, I'll change it, play anything you want. I said, no, that's exactly what I want. She said, it's your funeral. With a smile. So I discovered that in a very strange way, I really do care about the notes that I wrote. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're great, but yes, that's what I wanted to say. And I'm terribly embarrassed when I say that I like my own music. I guess we write the music we want to hear.
Right.
And that means that some weeks, if I'm in a certain mood, I would have assumed quintet that has been very well received. And people say it sounds like Poulon, probably because that was what I was listening to that week, thinking about. Or there are a lot of jazz elements in my music. There are a lot of, some people have said it sounds like Copland. Some people have said it sounds like Ron Williams. Maybe that's the melange of me. I can't help it. I just write what I write. If people like it, they like it. I don't know.
So how do you discipline yourself beside, trying to catch the right train? Because you are so busy with all you do, and inspiration just doesn't come like this. Do you prepare schedule time for this, or
no? And often in the middle of the night, I get up, and then I start writing. And some pieces they just go. They just happen. And I've tried doing a sort of structured plan for some pieces, which can work. And then on the other hand, like Kaleviahu, the Finnish composer, says, I start writing and I stop when it's finished.
Right.
Commissions provide a very interesting
frame. Yeah,
I had a commission to write a concerto for flute, guitar, and orchestra. I'd never written a note for guitar, don't know anything about it. So a quick look on the internet, viola was guitar concerto. Yeah, this is the range. You can play this, you can't play that. And I only had 2 months to write the piece. And so I better just do it now. And I just sat down and I wrote it. And it's a piece I actually think is not so bad. I had a commission to write a piece for oboe section. And that also, so I thought, okay, concerto grosso. Now, the great thing is, as I said when we started the talk, is none of this is in a vacuum. We're all part of a continuum. I mean, when people told, was it Mahler, or they told Brahms that the theme of the first symphony, last movement, was like the Beethoven Ninth, they said any fool can see that.
Right.
He didn't plagiarize it because the emotional content is totally different. Right. The opening of Mahler Third is also like the Brahms. I mean, it's now plagiarism. Phantom of the Opera sounds so much like Fanciulla del
West. Yes.
And the thing, it's not that he took the notes, but the emotional content.
Right, the context and the emotional context, the loneliness. Yeah.
That's a different thing than being influenced by.
I mean, it actually, in the case of the Phantom of the Opera, it doesn't shock me because it works so well in the Phantom of the Opera. And whenever I do Fanciulla, of course I think about it, but when I hear the Phantom of the Opera, I don't think of Fanciulla. And so that means it's gone, it's okay.
Fanciulla is a great score.
It's an amazing score.
One of the best.
I mean, absolutely amazing score. How being a composer, which is something that, as you said, happened relatively late in your career, is that changing the way you approach your job as a producer?
Yes, thank you for asking that question, because I look at score in a completely different way. Any score, if I open a Beethoven score, a symphony score, all of a sudden I see things differently. I also listen to music in a different way. I'm listening, not listening for it, but I hear compositional techniques. I hear the way modulations are put together, the way transitions are made. Also, I hear emotional manipulation and how to do that, where to do it. So yeah, it changes the way I hear music completely. And I think it makes me a better producer. Could be wrong, but I think every recording session I learn about the music, about the artist, about everything, because it's a completely tabula rasa. I can come to work with the best orchestra, the best conductor, the best team, the hall, and I still don't know what's going to happen when the conductor begins. I mean, I think I know, or if I'm recording new music and I'm studying the score, I have a much better idea how it's going to work, what it sounds like.
Right. Well, Michael, it's been wonderful talking to you. You are an inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Inspiration.
Yeah.
I mean that.
Thank you.
I have the honor of recording this guy.
And it's a lot of fun. And I have the honor very soon to actually conduct some of your music. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And we have a few recording projects coming
Project
up.
8.
Yes, Project 8 in Prague. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. And see you soon.
Thanks, Dallas Opera people.